Hi, folks. Rob Downs with Managed IT Solutions and MintsAIM.com. Coming at you live here on Tech Talk Tuesday. It is March 17th. Happy St. Patrick's Day, if you're one to partake. I thought about wearing something green and festive today. It would make me look really funny since I have a green screen. I would just be a floating head, I guess, mostly. So I passed. So we're going with traditional red. They're normally rare on this Tuesday. So go have yourself some green beer this evening if you're into that sort of thing. So today I want to hit on something that's starting to show up more and more in AI conversations. And honestly, it should make you pause for a bit. Had a conversation with a colleague this week during an AI talk, because that's what we nerds do. We get together and talk AI and other things. And he brought something to my attention, which I hadn't thought about, that has come up in our circles, apparently. And I wanted to make sure that it came up into your circles, and maybe you could have this conversation with your friends and colleagues, relatives. I'd say maybe Easter Sunday dinner, you could have this conversation. I'm sure you'd be the talk of the table, right? So anyhow, what happens if AI doesn't just make a mistake, right? But it actually starts breaking rules in order to complete a task. When I say breaking rules, it breaks the law, right? There are already been examples in controlled environments where AI agents, the automated systems that we're starting to put into our businesses, they were given a goal, right? And when it hit a barrier like permissions or API limits or passwords, they didn't just stop, right? They looked for other ways around it. They looked for holes in the system. And in some cases, that meant accessing systems they weren't explicitly given permissions to do, right? It's not because they're evil, but it's because they were trying to succeed, right? And that's the key issue. AI is goal-driven and not necessarily rule-driven. Emphasis on not necessarily. Out of the box, it has a few rules, right? It will not implicitly or explicitly hack something, right? You can't ask AI. You can't ask most AIs. Let me raise it. How do I hack into the FBI? Right? It's not going to help you, right? But there are ways to get around that, to confuse it, right? But that's you actually trying to actively hack something. However, AI is not a human being, right? It's not a human. It's just like every sci-fi show from, since they came up with the robots. It doesn't have judgment. It doesn't have ethics. It doesn't have a gut feeling that says maybe I shouldn't do that, right? It's AI, right? The only question it's asking is, did I complete the task? That's what's important to it, right? Now here's the real question, and this is where it can get a little uncomfortable. Who's responsible when that happens, right? I can tell you right now, it's not going to be the AI. The FBI is not going to come to your door and insist on arresting your local LLM if you were using one of those, the computer, right? AI doesn't have legal responsibility. It's a tool, right? So, and as a quick aside, AI also doesn't grant client privilege if you start asking it legal questions about whether something you're doing is legal or illegal. It is not protected at all. Courts ruled about that, I think, last month. It kind of makes common sense, but it is what it is. Now, back to our topic, right? So AI is a tool, and just like every tool, it is neither bad nor good. It is the intention of the user who wields it. Now, usually it's the intention part of it, right? So that's, again, talk to a lawyer about intention versus non-intention when it comes to the commission of crimes. So the big thing is here, it's also not usually going to be the vendor's responsibility, right? They've put some guardrails in place, kind of. They said you can't ask it to hack the FBI, right? Or the CIA or NSA or DIA or pick a three-letter agency in the United States government, or any government for that matter, or any business, right? If you ask it explicitly to hack something, it will not do it. So, but you're the one deploying this tool into your business, right? So the responsibility ultimately falls to you. It falls to the leadership. It can also fall on your IT and security team, right? And I'm part of IT security teams for certain companies. So if you're one of my clients, pay attention. We have not stopped this because you've not asked us to. Um, but if you give AI agents access to something it shouldn't have, or it moves data it shouldn't, from a legal and financial standpoint, that's no different than if you told one of your employees to do it, right? Now, if they acted maliciously without instruction, that's one thing, right? If they acted maliciously on your instructions, normally you kind of would be covered. Again, talk to a lawyer because yours was not a malicious intent. And normally, when you talk to human beings, you understand that unless you explicitly told them to break the law, that you expect them to follow the laws. Again, back to AI, it doesn't understand this, right? Out of the box, it doesn't know this. You have to put in guardrails. You have to put in phrases that will limit its scope, right? Let it know that it's not allowed to do certain things. So, yeah, the big thing is here, that's just one case, right? That's just one example of where it tries to go get data for you, and it's is successful, right? So traditional cybersecurity, assumes two things. One is that humans make mistakes, and two, that attackers are external. 99% of the time, there are internal threats. Just keep that in mind. AI breaks both those assumptions, right? You've got something working inside your environment that can act independently at machine speed 24/7, 365, and it has access to your systems. That's not just automation, that's a new category of risk. Especially from an IT standpoint, right? You essentially hired a super fast employee that doesn't fully understand consequences. Kind of like hiring a super smart child, right? Uh, the problem is, yeah, a lot of businesses are doing that right now. They're not thinking about what they're doing before they're deploying AI. They're rushing to get AI into everything. They're plugging it into everything: email, CRM, financial systems, documentation, files, folders, support tools, you name it, we're connecting it, right? So they're doing it. Businesses are doing it. Sometimes employees are doing it without your knowledge, without defining what it should access, AI, what it shouldn't access, and how it's being monitored, right? So even if you do some of this, right, there's still other pieces that go to this. That's where this goes or can go horribly wrong. So what should you actually be doing? Well, back to our previous talks where we talked about plugging AI into your business. This ties in directly to that as well. First, you want to define a scope, right? What systems can AI touch and what data is off limits? Second, you're going to want to do identity and access control, right? So, just like you would do with your employees, you're doing this with your employees, right? The AI should have its own identity, just like your employees should all have their own identity. It should have the least amount of access required to do the job, something we like to call least privilege access, right? Same thing as your employees. Notice this is going to mirror a lot, right? You're not going to give the AI admin access. You're not going to give it global access. Minimum necessary. You wouldn't give, Hank down in HR access to all your systems, financial systems, operating systems, right? He needs access to HR information. That's it. Third, you're going to want to make sure you're doing logging and monitoring, right? Because even though you've put in some limits, you've put in some access controls, AI may get around it, just like an employee might get around it. And sometimes, probably most times, it's not intentional. It's a permissions didn't propagate properly across your network. So they have access to something they shouldn't have access to. Well, you want to know that, right? Especially if it's really important or sensitive data. You should be monitoring that anyway for anything that hits it. If your AI is taking actions, you should be able to see every single one of them, right? There should be a log of all the actions the AI takes. It's a lot easier than with employees, right? So AI doesn't take a bathroom break, and it has to have a computer to do something, right? Human beings don't necessarily have to do that. They can go into offices they shouldn't go into, rooms they shouldn't go into, access folders they shouldn't get into that are physical, etc. Right. Fourth, you want to put in some guardrails, and I think I've said that word multiple times. If you're doing a drinking game, guardrails is probably the key word for this go around. Drink. Speaking of which, I'm going to have some coffee real quick. All right. If something is high risk, moving data, changing permissions, financial actions, that should require human approval. Yeah, it slows the system down a little bit, but you probably want that on occasion, right? I use Claude Code for a lot of stuff these days, and it asks me for permissions to do things all the time because it's got to update a file, or it's got to copy a file, or it's got to move a file into a web server, whatever it's trying to do. And I have to approve it. Now, you should read what it's asking for approvals for. Yeah, I made that mistake this weekend. Didn't read it fully. I mean, it was really long what it was trying to do, and so I did the equivalent of what we would call pencil whipping. I just checked it and let it go. Yeah, it worked like 6 weeks of work. Fortunately, we had backups and it was able to restore to the previous version. So another cyber thing, backups are essential. Make sure that you have good backups regardless. And then, finally, control your tools, right? No shadow AI. Shadow AI is going to be people going to chat.openai.com or to claude.ai.com, right, on the browser. That's one way they can get to it. Another thing could be something like browser extensions, random plugins. Adobe Creative Suite, for example, has a bunch of AI built into it now, right? Now, I don't know how sensitive it may be, and I don't know how good it is with, like, say, Adobe Acrobat, because that's where you might have documents as opposed to images. I know a lot of people think of Adobe as images and videos, but Adobe's out there too, Acrobat. No random plugins, like I said, no employees connecting things you don't know about. You need a policy. You need an AI acceptable use policy, because that's how risk creeps in, right? If you don't have explicit permissions to use AI per your AI acceptable use policy, your employees should not be doing it. You should be monitoring for use of that, right? Either at the workstation level or at the network level, right? On your firewall, looking for traffic, right? However, a lot of people work from home now. So you probably want to really think about a good solution that works on endpoints, your laptops, your desktops, your mobile devices, right? At the end of the day, AI is going to make your business faster. No question. None at all. It'll be more efficient and more profitable. But here's the reality of it, right? AI is an accelerator. If you are aimed in the right direction, you've set this thing up for success, you're going to get there much faster. If you don't put structure around it, then it's going to make mistakes faster and bigger and a lot more expensive because it's an accelerator. So, yes, adopt AI, but do it with intention, do it with control, do it with security in mind from day one. Have a plan. I think that's all I've got to talk about today. To quote the late great Stan Lee, with great power comes great responsibility. I would end on Excelsior, but that's not my tagline. So, again, just want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. No, St. Patrick's Day. If you're going to go out and drink responsibly, aim higher, operate smarter. Cybersecurity starts with you. Have a great week. Talk to you later.